new that I learned is that I need to team up with algae experts that I know enough about algae, even though I live in Florida for the past 13 years. So we have one of the more exciting projects I have. We're partnering with aquaculturalists, people that have a degree in oceanography or marine biology, and we're learning. They actually make a living of harvesting oysters in the Tampa Bay area or the Gulf of Mexico, and they're also venturing into potentially algae growing. It's really challenging. It's a whole different world. It's like farming, but on the sea. So when you ask me about how much future, and I know Kansas probably not, you won't see a lot of algae around there. But if this were to work,
we don't. We don't have a lot of that.
I don't think it. I don't think you can even. But if this were to work, I think there may be an option.
Welcome to the Beef Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Brandy Buzzard, and it's my pleasure to bring you the trending issues and topics with the best and brightest minds of the beef industry. Today, we are joined by Dr. Nicolas DiLorenzo, Assistant Professor in Animal Sciences at the North Florida Research and Education Center. Dr. DiLorenzo earned his master's and doctoral degrees from the University of Minnesota and conducted postdoctoral research at Texas Tech University, focusing on feedlot nutrition and management. In 2010, he joined the University of Florida as an assistant professor, and we are excited to have him on the podcast today to talk about all things nutrition, forage, and performance today. Welcome, Dr. DiLorenzo. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks a lot. Thanks. It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for making the time for this.
Oh, we're so happy to have you. What's new are you in your world, and how are things in Florida?
Very good. Very, very exciting. It's quite warm here right now. We're at the Florida Cattlemen Convention, which is a big event that attracts a lot of people, not only from Florida, but from different states too. We have a very vibrant trade show and some educational components that go along with that. So it's a pretty exciting. If you haven't been, or if anybody that may be listening to this have not been to our annual convention, it's always or almost always in Marco Island, a beautiful place in South Florida on the Gulf. And it's a perfect combination of business and education with some people may even make it into small family vacation when they can, because it's at a really nice location. So we've been working on delivering some of the research results that we had over the year, and also working on new projects. So that's it's been an exciting. It's always an exciting time in June when we come to the meeting.
I definitely agree with that. I went to the Florida Cattlemen's Conference maybe 10 years ago or 8 years ago or something like that, and I just was, appalled at how large it is. I think many cattle producers might be surprised to learn just how massive the beef industry is in Florida. I mean, I know that before I got involved, I used to think that Florida, you think Disney World, you think beaches and Miami and things like that. And there are a lot of cows and cattle in Florida. Yeah, I was there actually. I don't know when this episode will air, but I was there in early June for the Livestock Marketing Association Auctioneering Championship. And I flew into Fort Myers, and I drove to the site and drove through some beautiful cattle country, lots of cows. So it was a really, really nice drive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's very close. Yeah, people usually fly into Fort Myers. It's about an hour drive to Marco Island, and it's a beautiful small island. That's perfect combination. People and just visiting with neighbors. And you go to the grocery store to eat, and everybody knows that June this time we have this convention, so people recognize that it's not very often they get a tractor parked in the front of the Marriott Hotel. They do get, John Deere always parked a big tractor there, and it's part of the deal. So it's really amazing, and it's a big event for the island.
That's great. That's always great to hear that they're welcoming of farmers and ranchers and things like that. Yeah. Well, Well, let's jump in. You're in Florida now, but I know that's not where your career started. So maybe to start off with, can you tell us about how you got involved in the beef industry and your career path so far, and how you ended up in your role in Florida there with in animal science?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm originally from Argentina, so and my family has been involved in the cattle business for generations, and my passion about cattle and agriculture in general started back in my undergrad days in Argentina, following my grandpa and my uncle whenever they were going to the ranch, helping with cattle, spending all summers there. Well, vacation. As soon as I finished classes, I lived in the not actually, it was not a rural area where I grew up, but the family operation was about an hour and a half away from where I grew up. So I used to go as soon as classes will end. I'll move to this other smaller town to just move to the farm and spend the whole summer there and some of the winter breaks. So I always, I've always been passionate about that. I not always knew that I wanted to 100% be in agriculture. Agriculture, yes, I wasn't sure that beef cattle nutrition, which is what I do now, was my passion. I actually played a little bit with genetics, plant genetics in the undergrad and some undergrad projects that got me pretty excited. I have
Oh,
some small research appointment with canola, actually, of all things. I got to
okay.
help with that. I remember harvesting and canola and just looking at yields and at fat and things like that. So I was a bit undecided. I was always passionate about science. So that was always my passion. And then I really met a great professor at the university that he was very passionate about cattle nutrition and management in general. And that's really how I became more and more passionate about beef cattle. And then I could relate that to my grandpa's operation and everything that I was going through in my undergrad classes. So that's kind of how I got started. In Argentina, it's a 6 year degree. My degree is
Oh, okay.
agriculture engineer undergrad. So you get exposed a little bit to research and a few other things. So it was a good way to get exposed to everything before making a decision of which direction I wanted to go next. So that's kind of how I became more passionate about that. And when I went to my undergrad in agriculture engineer, in the last couple of years when we have more specialized classes, and forages and cattle were definitely my favorite classes. Even though I had to do plant pathology, plant genetics, soil science, we had all kinds of classes. And then towards the end, when I had those classes that I think they defined my career, I made up my mind that I wanted to continue studying that area. So
I think you mentioned two things that I think are very common in people in a role like yours, like in a professor role, and that's you said that you have a passion for science and that you had a professor who was like really involved and was excited and that you really admired and such like that. And I think those are two things that really help people find a lot of people in your role find a path that they're on. And I just thought that was really interesting that you said both of those.
absolutely, absolutely, and I kind of took that too as to realize of the importance that I have. Sometimes you don't think you're influencing somebody, especially students, and my experience kind of led me to realize that just the smallest things sometimes can be really appealing for the student. It can be the spark that ignites their passion for something. In my case, it was just listening to the professor, how passionate he was about cattle production in general or livestock production, because it was a little bit of everything. Is like that kind of got me interested in that. And but there is a little bit of luck along the way, I think, or some sort of randomness, I think, into that on how I ended up here from where I was studying.
Do you just circling back to the role, student instructor interaction at Florida, do you advise any students or teach any classes? Are you solely research and extension? Do you get to work with any students?
I do. Yeah, absolutely. I have a large graduate student program. My appointment in Florida, it's a 65% research, 35% extension. So I do that part of the teaching is what they call informal teaching, which is advising graduate students, but it's taking up a lot of my time and it's a part of my program that I really enjoy. It falls more within the research but category, but it certainly has been a really good way to recruit students, and all of the research projects end up with a student in charge of it. So yes, I work with students on a daily basis. I have learned how to. I don't know if I learned. I think I have developed some strategies about recruiting that I think are very important. And yeah, I always try to relate to my days as a student, what things I like, what I didn't like, and whenever it's possible. I'm getting farther and farther away from those days, but I still remember, and I'm gonna try to provide the same experience. I had an excellent graduate student experience with my advisor, Alfredo Di Costanzo. He was a phenomenal mentor, and I took a lot of that for in the way I advise my students, and a lot of that personal approach, that combination of high expectations, but at the same time, uh, just an equal treatment. Like with they are their future scientists or colleagues, so from day one, treating them as that, not so much as a student that they might not know. And at times, yeah, there's a time where I do wonder, but they always come around, the students.
That's great, to hear. I mean, it's part of your, of your job role there, but it's also here that not really great to hear that you put conscious effort into making that relationship and those experiences for those students as positive as possible while also creating that research environment that's going to get results. And so that's just, as a former master's student, I appreciate hearing, that there are other professors out there like that. So that's great to hear. While we're kind of talking about research here, in several different forms, is there anything that you can share with us that you're working on right now that is really has you really excited, that you're looking forward to seeing the results or anything like that? Can you share something with us?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And I my research portfolio, it's a bit diverse, always in the subject of beef cattle nutrition and management. But yeah, I do have a diverse funding portfolio where projects that are funded by the Florida Cattlemen Association, some many of them by the USDA, and a few by the private industry. So right now, those are the three main funding streams of my program. And I some of the things that I overall my program, it works in improving the feed efficiency, or the efficiency of beef production systems, minimizing the environmental impact, with attempting to minimize the environmental impact. Within that, there are many lines that open. One that I very actively working on is identifying more efficient animals, and that's really where my research and extension programs merge. I do have an active role. I've been the person in charge of the Florida Bull Test. So as part of that,
Mm-hmm.
that is a big extension program here at UF. And for the past 6 years that I've been involved with that program, I was involved before when I joined the university in on a different role, more as working on the nutritional aspects. Now I'm in charge of the program, and it's been a very rewarding experience because it allowed us to create impact in the state by allowing producers to bring bulls being tested for feed efficiency, and then hopefully incorporating that into their operations, that genetics, to improve feed efficiency while maintaining growth performance, which is it's like absolutely important, and carcass performance too. So that's really where my extension and research programs merge. But more getting more into the hardcore research part of it. I've been
Yeah.
working for years on feed additives, always looking for ways to improve ruminal fermentation. In the past, has been more aimed at efficiency, feed efficiency. I work with feed additives such as ionophores, uh, plant secondary compounds, tannins, organic acids, etc. Probiotics, I do work a lot with pro and prebiotics. That's a very active line of research. And I think it's a changing world, and it's amazing how the technology advances. Back when I was in my undergrad, I remember doing lit reviews about pro and prebiotics. Actually, I don't even think the word I think we were starting to use prebiotic back then, but the probiotic were a
Mm-hmm.
big hit at the time.
Yeah.
And we did not get the result. I did some of that work back in 2002, 2003, and it wasn't very encouraging. And it's just exciting to see how maybe 11 years later, things have changed. We learn we have different tools. We're learning more. We got ways to measure now the microbiome, for example, and we are now seeing things that before I don't think we were able to measure. So that's been a very exciting part of it, and it ties very well with my greenhouse gas emissions part of the research, which is an area that is absolutely growing exponentially. That part of my research program.
Well, speaking of greenhouse gases, you brought that in, so that's a great segue. Are there any big breakthroughs on the horizon when it comes to research and cattle nutrition or management in terms of greenhouse gas reduction? I mean, can you give us maybe what you see coming down the road 5 years from now?
Absolutely, yeah. Sadly, I don't know if we have any major breakthroughs in terms of compounds that are consistently decreasing methane or even management strategies. Some of the most successful ones are coming from the private sector, and they've been in the form of analogs to certain enzymes that are key in the methane cycle. There's been some consistent and documented effects on reduction of methane. Unfortunately, for reasons that I'm not fully aware of, the regulatory field has prevented some of those, or particularly one of those compounds, to be approved, at least in the US, to my knowledge. I know it's been approved in some other places, so it may happen soon. Right now, we don't have that tool available, and that actually we get to discuss quite a bit that during projects one of the projects funded I have through Dairy Management Inc. Looking at on-farm reductions of methane in dairy farms. So with that, we get to evaluate different technologies. So we would like to evaluate different technologies that are ready to be deployed on farm that we could feed to dairy cattle and sell the milk. And that's when we became aware of that challenge. Some of the best options that we have, which one of them it's that particular molecule analog called 3-nitroxypropanol is it's widely known by now. And the other one is the use of algae. There are certain type of algae that have some plant secondary compounds that have a very similar effect to this other molecule, which inhibits methane emissions to a great degree and somewhat consistently, but the research has been slow to appear, particularly on the algae side. So those two right now, every time we talk about methane, they emerge as the top, and they made the headlines. And in many cases, it's something that has been documented. Unfortunately, they're not widely available today, either for regulatory purposes or both, or for supply issues. So right now we don't have a tool in terms of, and maybe strictly talking about feed additives. As far as management practices, is the same or even worse. There's very few that have been documented to have an impact.
You mentioned algae, and that's one I've heard a lot about in the news. Like, I've read articles and things about how algae has been shown to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So I'm just wondering, like, I live in Kansas. I know there's algae around me, but not as much probably as you need. So I'm wondering, I'm curious about the affordability to incorporate algae at some point for producers nationwide. Is that going to be an option that can be affordable for everyone to use? Or do you think, in your opinion, is that going to be something that is more accessible and more affordable for people on the coasts? Or maybe I'm completely.
It's yes, that's $1 million question. That's an excellent question. That's kind of what I was going to go with my the last part of my response on the 5 years. So this is a good segue to get to the what I see this in the 5 years. Um, Unfortunately, the algae is very confined to a certain type of algae that have been identified to have this compound. So it's not that every and all algae out there. I have to confess, I'm learning a lot of an algae, particularly in the last couple. I have 3 projects now that involve algae in some way or form. One of them funded by the Florida Cattlemen Association. So we are learning a lot of the things. I'm actually one thing that it's not new that I've learned is that I need to team up with algae experts that I know enough about algae, even though I live in Florida for the past 13 years. So we have one of the more exciting projects I have. We're partnering with aquaculturalists, people that have a degree in oceanography or marine biology, and we're learning. They actually make a living of harvesting oysters in the Tampa Bay area or in the Gulf of Mexico, and they're also venturing into potentially algae growing. It's really challenging. It's a whole different world. It's like farming but on the sea. So when you ask me about how much future, and I know Kansas probably not, you won't see a lot of algae around there. But if this were to
Yeah,
work,
we don't. We don't
yeah,
have a lot of
I don't think it. I don't think you can even. But if this were to work, I think there may be an option to make it available. There's plenty of ocean, of course, and I think the industry will figure out a way to make it economically feasible. But before that, it has to be proven to be effective, and of course, it has to be cost effective. And one thing I always emphasize on methane, and not just me, but everybody that really has been working on methane emission mitigations is the need to find solutions that do not compromise production. So the solution has to come from an approach that would not reduce either digestibility, definitely health, and animal well-being, but it has to come that solution accompanied by a similar, if not better, performance than what we're used to. So yeah, the carbon footprint it's key, but it has to be taken in the context of production. I think everybody that is working on greenhouse gas emissions in the context of population growth, demand for animal protein products, everybody agrees. There's one thing that we all agree on is that the need to use an approach that will not compromise production. So, 5-10 years from now, I think we will figure out a lot of things. I confess at some point I thought that maybe we could wild harvest algae, and especially the ones that are annoying like sargassum, and maybe feed it to cattle. And it's not as easy as I thought. And not all the algae. One thing I learned, not all the algae really work at mitigating methane. But at the same time, working with experts in the field, there's just a ton of different species that we don't even know what they do. So I think there's some potential there. Scale up, the ability to scale
not
up.
all algae is equal.
Yeah, it's gonna be So you wouldn't be surprised if then in the future we do. There's some private investments that they're scary in their scale. One particular that I'm aware of in Hawaii that definitely there might be something there, I guess.
Well, that's really interesting. Something you said a little bit ago. You're talking about. You're talking about the intersection of you don't want to have something that decreases greenhouse gas emissions and then it negatively impacts something else or it's not profitable. And I think that that's a point that that's really a complex intersection between animal welfare and I guess environmental sustainability. I was part of a panel or hosted a panel in February at the National Cattlemen's NCBA trade show, and Dr. Lily Edwards Calloway and Dr. Kim Stackhouse Lawson, they spoke about their respective areas and how there are no black and white answers, that it's really gray because you can't do something it may reduce greenhouse gases by a certain percent, but if it totally negatively impacts animal welfare, that's not a solution. And so I think that that's something when we have to take all the other facets of beef production into consideration, that adds just another several layers of complexity to the issue, because everything works together. It's not, they're not in silos, or they work very closely together. And so I think that's something that makes progress and solutions come more slowly, because there's not just a blanket solution that works for everything. And I think that's something that we have to be aware of and have to make sure that people know, is that things are complex because they're related.
Absolutely. One of the biggest challenges with methane is that it's like I call when I tell my student when we talk about methane, it's a necessary evil, because really methane formation in the rumen has a purpose. It's just a purpose to get rid of, dispose of those the reducing equivalents that are formed during the fermentation. So in order to ferment feedstuff, we need to redirect all of those reducing equivalents somewhere, and methane has been the way to do it. So we do need some methanogenesis, and there are very well documented consequences of totally reducing or eliminating completely methanogenesis in the rumen, and it's never been good. So it has to be definitely coupled with another approach, where maybe we can make use of that stored energy somehow. But it's been a huge challenge. I think everybody would agree. And you mentioned some of the key players there in the sustainability arena. People in Colorado that I know they're doing a lot of work, and I really would love to see more people jumping into this, and jumping just because if it's a fascinating area of work, and because it's something we need to tackle, not because there's money. And unfortunately that has been in many cases the driver behind people wanting to do more research on greenhouse gas emissions. When I started doing this 10 years ago, there was not a lot of money on that or a lot of excitement. But for me, it was just one more aspect of ruminal fermentation, which I was always passionate about. But it was not nearly as excited. This is a program that is a good example that my greenhouse gas emission mitigation program, that it was totally driven by a need. I'd never anticipated working that much on that or having as many students solely dedicated to that portion of animal production. So, and I still do not want to ignore some other very important areas such as forage digestibility. I've been working on at a system level trying to improve forage digestibility for years. Usually that comes accompanied by more methane emissions. So I have to figure out a way to reconcile both parts of my program.
Improved digestibility, but not more emissions. You have to find the balance there. So for producers who are interested in greenhouse gas reduction and want to improve that climate impact, could you share perhaps two things that you've learned, or two pieces of advice for cattle producers who want to improve their environmental impact, things that they can implement on the ranch or the farm or ranch right now?
Absolutely. Well, and it all depends on the type of operation, of course, but it's challenging question too. But it's really that's what I do on a daily basis with extension. I get asked that question a lot, so I know I know how hard it is to answer. There are ways to reduce the carbon footprint, and better use of resources is always a good one. Improving efficiency, absolutely, it's one of the easiest ways. If we can produce more with what we have, identifying those animals that are more productive, for example, and we have that very well documented. If an animal produces the same beef with 5 less pounds of feed, that is a huge win for the carbon footprint. It has two effects. It has the direct effect of lowering that what we call emissions intensity, so the amount of emissions per unit of product. But at the same time, the emissions that were used to generate those 5 extra pounds of feed, whether it was a forage, if it was a grain or a grain byproduct. So that's where life cycle assessment come into play to really assess that multiplier, that impact that has. So better use of resources, forages, capturing carbon is not as easy as we think, but there's ways to do it. Silvopasture systems seem to work, not so much in the area where I'm working. I mean, I always see examples of that in the tropics that seem to be successful. Unfortunately, in my direct experience, we have not been able to implement it successfully, at least in Florida. It's always one or the other. I mean, it's always the cattle get compromised, cattle production is compromised, or timber, it's production is compromised. It's really not that simple. But good use of the resources, whether it's feed or just store forages, maybe there would be down the road improvements such as the ones that we had in types of like corn and sorghum, for instance, with brown midrib. Uh, Genetically modified materials that might have lower or increased digestibility, maybe less lignin. I think those are tools that we have already that we could implement. Um, Maybe the easiest one, and I've done the math several times, is just the low hanging fruit is culling inefficient animals or being more aggressive. For instance, that's where really my day to day extension, we talk about making sure we have a breeding season, tightening it up to 90. In our case, we do 75 days, and any cows or heifers that are outside of that window, they perhaps don't need to be in that operation. That is one of the easiest ways to improve the carbon footprint of an operation without even buying a new feed additive or anything like that. Um, Working on stocking rates and grazing operations, strategic supplementation. Sometimes I've done those calculations too, with sometimes a very small amount of a supplement, and it could be an energy or a protein supplement. It really enhances productivity tremendously, and as a direct consequence of that, the carbon footprint goes down. So that's just looking at the low hanging fruits, and then down the road, I would love to be able to recommend producers to add additive to their diet. That is, right now, it has really been challenging to do so. But it continues to be one of the most important areas of research for many of us. But it's been a very very long road in that sense.
It's interesting that, we were talking about there are no blanket solutions. That's the word I'm looking for. There's no blanket solutions, but one easy way to make an impact is just to cull animals, like you said, in your words, cull inefficient animals that aren't falling in that breeding season. And I think that, that's fabulous advice. Just stick to those good production management, and you can have the side effects that are, better for, environmental impact. And that's really, I'm glad you said that. So, we have talked a lot about your research and greenhouse gas emissions and additives and things like that. But when you're not doing research or working with cattle, what else are you filling your time with? Like, you have any hobbies or things like that?
Thank you for the question. The hobbies are very important. There needs to be balance in everybody's life. So when I'm very passionate about research and extension. You might be able to tell. But when I'm not working, I love watching soccer, as any good Argentinian and South American soccer. It's a big deal for me. I like to play soccer too. We do play with students and some of my colleagues at work. We get together every now and then to play. I love fishing. That's a big passion. And when I was in Minnesota for 6 years fishing, we had land of 10,000 lakes. I used to go almost everywhere, drive less than half hour and be in a lake fishing. Here is a little different. I learned that Florida fishing is trickier, but I've been able to enjoy both saltwater and freshwater fishing, and quite different and quite variety the options. So I enjoy that. Reading, I used to enjoy reading a lot more. Now I spend so much time reading at work that I realize I'm reading less and less, and maybe more enjoy time outside. I like gardening, vegetable garden. I really I got that from my grandpa. Probably he was an Italian immigrant, and he was big into gardening. So he always had a huge garden and full of different vegetables. So I tried to do that. I also learned how much challenging gardening is in Florida. It seems like we have every pest known to the humankind. It is amazing how quickly they develop here. And so I have blackberries that I've been learning how to trim, but within a week they get full of bugs. Tomatoes, it's amazing. They're beautiful today. Wait, no, I was just saying that they're talking about the challenge. Tomatoes, same thing. They look green, beautiful. They start turning red, and I don't know out of where just a swarm of insects, different type, they come in less than a day. There's no tomatoes. So I really suck at integrated pest management.
Well, you don't have any ice or anything to kill them in the wintertime. They don't knock back. They just stay there. You mentioned that you're a soccer fan. I heard this guy named Lionel Messi, who's an Argentinian, is coming to Florida. How excited are you about that?
Very excited, very surprised too. I would have never in a million years. I know there was a rumor that he might be coming, and I never thought that that was possible. I have to confess, I already started looking for tickets, but they're way out of my budget right now. So I might
Yeah.
wait until he starts getting a little older and not playing as well to be able to afford going to maybe Orlando. That's the closest. I already have it mapped. I could go to Orlando and drive 4 hours, Atlanta and drive 4 hours, or I think there's another one in North Carolina where they meet.
Well, you got to do it. If he's the greatest, I don't follow soccer very closely, really, at all. I'm in Kansas and I have American football to cheer for. But I have heard a lot that that is a big deal that he is coming to the U.S. football landscape or whatever. So I hope that you get to go.
Absolutely. And I like sports in general. I do follow American football too. I'm not. I usually get just passionate towards the end, the Super Bowl, the big game, the college games. But I don't follow the news on college football, and definitely I like college football more than NFL. I have to admit, just the atmosphere.
You have a pretty good team down there to cheer for.
Yeah.
A couple of them.
We're excited for it.
Well, we're coming up on college football season too. I think we're only like 90 days away, so that's very exciting.
During my time at Texas Tech, that's when I realized how important that was a cultural shock moving from the Twin Cities all the way to Lubbock, Texas. And it's just amazing how the city gets transformed around the fall when football season is about to start. And the passion that there is.
There's a little bit of difference in, I would say, the level of football hype between Minnesota and Texas. I would say those are very different atmospheres around football.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But so I do enjoy sports. Sport, gardening, and fishing. Maybe it's just the three hobbies. And spending time with the family, of course. And if I can combine that, if I can get my daughter to help me with gardening every now and then, I do. That's even a plus.
No, that's great. I have a 6-year-old daughter, and I like to get her out in the garden too. She just picked all of our radishes the other day, and she thought that was very exciting. So it's a good way to get kids to learn about their food and such.
And it sends a message. I think it's very important. So yeah, I try to do that as often as I can. So.
We have a time and labor saving product for you. Beef and Dairy Agri-Slat by Healthy Farms is your solution. No more lugging jugs around the barn every month. With Beef and Dairy Agri-Slat, you simply drop the slat through the floor twice a year, and it works to break down solids, reduces crusting and forming. To learn more, visit myhealthyfarms.com.
Well, that is kind of the end of our formal interview. I do have 3 wrap-up questions, and we ask every guest these. So, and you said that you read a lot, so this should be probably easy for you to answer. But what is your favorite beef-related book or resource? Whether it's like a guide, or maybe it's an extension material, or maybe it's a book about cattle or something like that. My husband has a book about dwarfism in Herefords that he loves. So everybody has I can't remember. It's called Bull Runts or something like that. But anyway, what is your favorite beefy?
My favorite book, A Land Remembered. I can't remember. I'm really bad at. I really should look up the author because it is about Florida, how the cattle industry and the citrus industry in Florida began. Actually, it's a book that they gave to us when I started as an assistant professor years ago, and I didn't get to read it until maybe a couple of years after that. I was too worried about tenure and everything else. It's a novel, really, but it has a lot of historical context on how cattle production began in Florida. A land remember. I absolutely recommend. I wish I remember the author, and it's really embarrassing that I don't. But it's one of my favorite books.
Well, our audience can look it up and they can find the author that way. Okay, so turning and pivoting a bit, what is a book that's not related to the beef industry or agriculture that you are currently reading, or is maybe one of your favorites?
I haven't really been reading anything that it's not related to agricultural lately. Let me think. No, I haven't had anything. I have not been reading anything that relaxing. When I have time, I'm out in the garden.
You're gardening, or you're watching football, or
or watching football. Yes.
Those are all important, and those
I've
are all
been
very
reading,
important.
Yeah, a lot of maybe because of my job reading so much. I try to read things that are not related to cattle, but I always get attracted to that anyways.
Right. Well, that's okay. All right. And our final wrap up question is, what is a trait in someone that you admire that has allowed them to be successful? Someone that you admire, what's one of their personal characteristics that you think has allowed them to be successful?
I always admire people that know how to recognize talent in others, and then that turn that into an effective recruiting, and it could recruiting or working with them. People that really, I think it actually is one of the things that's going to be key in the future. Just be able to recognize. We're moving into a world that everything it's electronics, computers, and social media. So the interpersonal skills are being diminished quite a bit. So the ability to, within a short conversation, to spot a person that may be a game changer, and be able to convince that person to work with you or in a project, or I think that's recognizing talent. I guess in general, it's one of the things that I think I would like to learn more about and work more on.
That's interesting. And you're not wrong about interpersonal skills. In a time when we're always on phones and screens, it's important to not lose the basic skills of conversation and communication and just social interaction.
In my graduate student, that is one of the things that I try to work on, and on them. We do interviews before they join my program, and that's when sometimes I wish I had. I can't complain. I've really been very successful. I think I created a good program, and I'm very happy. But sometimes it's harder and harder to spot some of those skills in very short conversations. So.
Well, that's definitely something to think about, and another skill to think about personally. So thank you for sharing that. That is all the time we have for today. I want to thank you, Dr. DiLorenzo, for joining us here on the Beef Podcast Show. If people want to find more information about you or your research, where can they do that?
They can go to the University of Florida Animal Science webpage, or NFREC, North Florida Research and Education Center. Both pages are linked to each other, so they can find out more about it. I'm not as good as all of my peers sometimes at keeping up with the latest publication. I also do have a lab webpage. It's DiLorenzoNutrition.com. So it is DiLorenzo Nutrition Lab.
Okay. Well, we will make sure to put that in the show notes so that people can find that, DiLorenzoNutritionLab.com, and people will be able to look that up and follow your research or get in touch with you if they want. So, and thank you again for joining us. And we appreciate you taking time out of your schedule while you're there at Florida Cattlemen's. And to our audience, we hope that you'll join us next week on the Beef Podcast.
I appreciate it. Thank you.